Saskatchewan. We have left Winnipeg and are now traveling across the Great Canadian Prairie, which stretches westward to the Rockies for a distance of 800 miles. This land, much of which in summer is in vast fields of golden grain, is now bare and brown, extending on and on in rolling treeless plains as far as our eyes can reach. Most of it is cut up into sections a mile square, divided by highway spaces 100 feet wide. However, an automobile or wagon can go almost anywhere on the prairie, and everyone makes his own road. 60 miles west of Winnipeg, we pass Portage la Prairie, near where John Sanderson, the man who filed the first homestead on the prairies, is still living. This part of the Dominion was then inhabited by Indians, and its only roads were the buffalo trails made by the great herds that roamed the country. Today it is dotted with comfortable homes of prosperous farmers, and the transcontinental railways have brought it within a few days' travel of the Atlantic and the Pacific seaboards. 150 miles farther west, we cross the boundary into Saskatchewan, the greatest wheat province of the Dominion. It has an area larger than that of any European country except Russia, and is as large as France, Belgium, and Holland combined. From the United States boundary, rolling grain lands extend northward through more than one-third of its area. The remainder is mostly forest, thinning out toward Reindeer Lake and Lake Athabasca at the north, and inhabited chiefly by deer, elk, moose, and black bear. There are sawmills at work throughout the central part of the province, and the annual lumber cut is worth in the neighborhood of $2 million. Except at the southwest, Saskatchewan is well watered. The Saskatchewan River, which has many branches, drains the southern and central sections. This stream in the early days was a canoe route to the Rockies. For a long time afterward, when the only railway was the Canadian Pacific Line in the southern part of the province, the river was the highway of commerce for the north. It was used largely by settlers who floated their belongings down it to the homesteads they had taken up on its banks. Now the steamboats that ply there have almost entirely disappeared. The northern part of the province is made up of lakes and rivers so numerous that some of them have not yet been named. The southwest is a strip of semi-arid land that has been brought under cultivation by irrigation and now raises large crops of alfalfa. A small part of southwestern Saskatchewan, near the Alberta boundary, is adapted for cattle and sheep raising. The Chinook winds from the Pacific keep the winters mild and the snowfall light, so that livestock may graze in the open all the year round. Elsewhere, the winters are extremely cold. The ground is frozen dry and hard, the lakes and streams are covered with ice, and the average elevation of about 1,500 feet above sea level makes the air dry and crisp. The people do not seem to mind the cold. I have seen children playing out of doors when it was 25 degrees below zero. The summers are hot, and the long days of sunshine are just right for wheat growing. After traveling 14 or 15 hours from Winnipeg, we are at Regina, the capital of Saskatchewan, on the main line of the Canadian Pacific, about midway between Winnipeg and the Rockies. I visited it first in 1905, when the province was less than a year old. Until that time, all the land between Manitoba and British Columbia, from the United States to the Arctic Ocean, belonged to the Northwest Territories. It had minor subdivisions, but the country as a whole was governed by territorial officials with headquarters at Regina. As the flood of immigrants began to spread over the West, the people of the Wheat Belt decided that they wanted more than a territorial government, and so brought the matter before the Canadian Parliament. As a result, the great inland provinces of Saskatchewan and Alberta were formed. They are the only provinces in the Dominion that do not border on the sea. Regina was then a town of ragged houses, ungainly buildings, and wide streets with board sidewalks reaching far out into the country. One of the streets was 2 miles long, extending across the prairie to the mounted police barracks and the government house. Regina was the headquarters of the Northwest Mounted Police until that organization was amalgamated with the Dominion Force as the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and the city is still a training camp for recruits. Saskatchewan was not then old enough to have a state house, and the government offices were in rooms on the second floors of various buildings. Most of the provincial business was done in a little brick structure above the Bank of Commerce. The hotels of the town were then packed to overflowing, even in winter, and in the spring and summer it was not uncommon to find the halls filled with cots. I had to sleep in a room with 2 beds and with a companion who snored so that he shook the door open night after night. It was of no use to complain, as the landlord could tell one to go elsewhere, knowing very well that there was nowhere else but outside. Today, Regina is 10 times as large as it was 20 years ago. It is a modern city with up-to-date hotels, 10 banks, handsome parliament buildings, and 12 railway lines radiating in every direction. It is the largest manufacturing center between Winnipeg and Calgary, and an important distributing point for farm implements and supplies. The dome of the Capitol building, which was completed in 1911, can now be seen from miles away on the prairie. This is an imposing structure, 542 feet long, situated in the midst of a beautiful park on the banks of an artificial lake made by draining Wascana Creek. The city has many other parks, and the residence streets are lined with young trees planted within the last 20 years. 40 miles to the east is a government farm at Indian Head, where experiments are made in growing and testing trees suited to the prairies. 50 million seedlings have been distributed in 1 year among the farms and towns. Out in the country, the trees are planted as windbreaks and to provide the farmers with fuel. They have greatly changed the aspect of the prairies within the last 2 decades. While in Regina, I have had a talk with the Governor General of Saskatchewan in his big 2-story mansion that 20 years ago seemed to be situated in the middle of the prairie. When I motored out to visit His Excellency, although I was wrapped in buffalo robes and wore a coonskin coat and coonskin cap, I was almost frozen. And when I entered the mansion, it was like jumping from winter into the lap of summer. At one end of the house is a conservatory where the flowers bloom all the time, although Jack Frost has bitten off all other vegetation with the 40 degrees below zero teeth he uses in this latitude. From Regina, the main line of the Canadian Pacific Railway runs west to Calgary. Were we to travel by that route, we should pass through Moose Jaw and Swift Current, 2 important commercial centers for the wheat lands. The story is told that Lord Dunsmore, a pioneer settler, once mended the wheel of his prairie cart with the jawbone of a moose on the site of the former city, and thus gave the place its name. Moose Jaw is a livestock as well as a wheat shipping point. It has the largest stockyards west of Winnipeg. An extensive dairying industry has grown up in that region. North of Regina are Prince Albert and Battleford, noted for their fur trade and lumber mills, and also Saskatoon, the second largest city of the province, which we shall visit on our way to Edmonton. At Saskatoon is the University of Saskatchewan, which was patterned largely after the University of Chicago. It has the right to a Rhodes Scholarship, and its departments include all the arts and sciences. As 60% of the people are dependent upon agriculture, farm courses receive much attention. A 1,000-acre experimental farm is owned by the university, and the engineering courses include the designing and operation of farm machinery. Even the elementary schools are interested in agriculture, a campaign having been carried on recently to eradicate gophers, which destroy the wheat. The children killed 2 million of these little animals in 1 year, thereby saving, it is estimated, 1 million bushels of grain. A department of ceramics has been organized at the university to experiment with the extensive clay deposits of the province, the various grades of which are suited for building brick, tile, pottery, and china. Saskatchewan's only other mineral of any importance is lignite coal, although natural gas has been discovered at Swift Current. End of chapter 23.